Hi everyone, it's Jeanette here from the Sewing Studio with some quick little Christmas projects. I was given a couple of scrap bags and asked to do some projects, and as we're getting quite close to Christmas, I thought I would do some quick little ones, and the one we're going to do today is this cushion. Now, it was a cushion that I used to teach beginner quilters because it's really good for sort of the accuracy of the 1/4 of an inch and also sort of the match points, but it's quite simple because it's just squares. But what I decided was I could take this very simple cushion and actually recreate it using a scrap bag. So this is the one I've got, and it's lovely. They're Holly Taylor fabrics, and anybody that's watched any of my Christmas tutorials before will know I particularly like Holly Taylor's Christmas fabrics. So I'm just going to get those out here. Now you can see I've been playing with these already, so there's part strips and all sorts in here. But I generally tend to just separate them out into their colours, and I've got 4 colours in this one. So I've got the burgundies, greens, some tan ones, and some lights or whites in this. And in this one in particular, there's quite a lot of lights, but they're really nice colours. So I thought, well, actually, we've got 4 colours there, so I could definitely recreate that cushion because we just need 16 squares. Now, because this is a 16-inch cushion, the squares are 4.5 inches, but I tend to work a little bit bigger when I'm doing any sort of scrap project, and then I can trim it back to size because sometimes sort of shift happens and also sort of shrinkage, and sometimes when we're doing scrap things, they don't always come out perfectly. So I've got my other 15 pre-made there, but what I've done is really simple. I've just cut myself a little 5-inch square from wadding. Now I cut the whole stack, and I had a whole stack of them, and we're going to do a bit of a quilt-as-you-go method, or this is also called stitch and flip. So it's really simple. Now, if I have a look here, I think the one I've got to do on the bottom row, yes, that I'm missing is light. So each row is going to have one of these colours in them, and I've tried to sort of place them in different places. So I've already worked with these colours here, so I'm just going to set those aside, and I'm just going to pick some of these. Now, because these strips are quite wide, with the ones I've already done, I found that 3 strips are plenty to cover. But if you've got narrower strips, you might take 4, you might even take 5. Or if you're using strips from your scraps, if they're narrower, you might take more. But we're going to make sure we cover that whole 5-inch square with our strips. So I'm going to pick the 3 that I would like to use on here. And I'm rather liking that green one. I think that's looking a bit plain to me. Let's go a bit dotty. And I'm being rather fussy here, aren't I? Let's go all dotty. Let's do that one. So I've got sort of quite a busy one, a larger print, and then sort of one that looks a little bit plainer. But it really doesn't matter. You can sort of pick out any 3 that you like. Now, at the moment, these have all still got their selvages on. Now, you can either go through and take all the selvages off first, but when I'm doing small projects like this, I just tend to sort of trim it to my 5 inches and take that little short bit of selvage off as I go. It's a little bit easier sometimes. So let's just put those out of the way, keep myself tidy here so I don't cut into something. Okay, so we're just going to lay that one down. I'm actually going to cut from that side. And I'm just going to cut a 5, maybe just over a little 5 inches, just to make sure I cover the whole thing. But this is bigger than I need. So I'm just going to cut that down to 5 inches, and then I'm just going to put the ruler here, and I'm just going to take off the width that I can get. Now this is 2 1/4, this has come out at, and I'm just going to throw that one away. So that's one strip. I'm going to do the same with the other 2. So 5 inches, and then we're just going to cut off. Basically, it's the selvage bit. Now, this one isn't quite so wide. This is about 2 1/8. But it really doesn't matter the width on these. It doesn't even matter, actually, if they're straight. You just need to cover, unless you're bothered by things not being straight, and then do cut them straight. If I put that in under the close-up, you can see. So there's my 5-inch line. And I'm just going to cut off a 5-inch piece. And take off the selvage. So I've got 3 strips there. Now they happen to be roughly about the same size, but you may have some which are wider and some that are narrower in there. It all works as long as you cover that wadding. That's all you need. So we've finished with those strips now. So we can now take these to the sewing machine, and my only other decision is the order, and I think I'm going to put them on like so. So I'm just going to lay the first one down on top, making sure I can't see any of that wadding underneath. And then I'm going to line this one up, and then I'm going to do 1/4 of an inch along those two edges. Now I'll just put a pin in that because I'm carrying it to the machine. But we're just going to stitch that down, and then once that one is down, we'll add this third one. So my machine is set up with 1/4 of an inch. Just going to lift the foot. Now the other thing I am going to do, because I'm going through a little bit of thickness here with the wadding, so I'm actually just going to take my stitch length up. I tend to go up to about a 2.4. Now, when I'm at home doing these, I'll just chain piece, and all that means is you just keep sending them through one after the other. So I tend to work on sort of 2 or 3 at a time. And then you don't have to be cutting the thread in between. You can just keep sewing. So you can see there, that's all I've got left to cover. Now there's that covered. Now you can take that to the iron and give it a press. I tend to just sort of work as it is. I tend to finger press as I go. But now we can add some quilting. So this is where sort of the Quilt-as-you-go goes in. And all I did with that, and I'm going to leave this 1/4 of an inch foot on, is I'm just going to stitch either side of those seam lines. Now once I've done that, I'm just going to put a couple more stitch lines in, and you can make these all the same width, you can do them further apart. Let's just, for a bit of interest, let's just move these further apart. But I just have to be careful because my needle can only go that far on this particular foot. And then I'm just going to put a couple more here. Now I might throw a wide one in and actually line it up with the edge of that foot. That will just give me a different width. One more stitch line should do it, I think. There we are. Now I'll just show you under the close-up how that's looking. So basically now, sorry, let me just move all those out of the way. Basically now we've got all our quilting in. So that is definitely sort of a quick quilt as you go. We've flipped and stitched it onto the wadding, and then we've put our quilting in. And now all we need to do is trim that down to 4.5 inches. And we can choose which areas we want to use for that, because that's 5 inches. So I can either go that way and have this fabric a little bit more, or I can make them so they look pretty even. We've got quite a lot of room to play with. I think I'm going to go about there. And I'm just looking where my end stitches are, that I haven't got anything too close to the seam. So there we are. We've got our 4.5 inch square, really quick and simple. Now let's bring in our other blocks and we can sort of see how that's going to look. Now I've got these labelled, I've laid them out, and top tip, take a picture. Particularly if, you know, the doorbell goes or the phone rings or something and you sort of go and answer the door or answer the phone. And, you know, if the dogs come and move them all, or if you come back to it the next day. So it's always worth taking a photo. Now, as I'm laying them out, I'm doing it so that the seams are going vertically, then horizontally, and then underneath, where I've got a vertical row, I'm going to go horizontally. And it just means you haven't got so many seams coming together. And it also gives a bit more interest for where we've got the quilting lines. So let's just lay this one out. But I say it's fairly quick and simple. This is my row 3. That's horizontal, so we're going to go vertical again. And then I think that one goes there. And that's going to be our cushion. So we still get the look that we've got that solid square from the colour, but it's made from 3 different strips, so it's made from our narrower strips. You can take that principle and apply it to anything, even if it's just reds, but different shades of red, it still works because you just see the block of colour, not the individual elements within it. So then to just finish this off as a quilt-as-you-go, all I'm going to do is put these together, and I tend to work in rows. And I tend to do right onto left. And we can just take those to the machine. And I'm just going to sew them with the wadding. Now, because you've got the wadding there, it is a little bit bulkier. So when it comes to pressing the seams, press the seam open. It will distribute some of that bulk. And I tend to have them all lined up next to me at the sewing machine. And then I can just chain piece them through. So I've sewed all the rows together and I've pressed these seams open, you can see here. So I'm just going to take this to the iron and press the final row open, and then we'll put the whole thing together. So it's a little bit bulky, but I tend to just press it open with my fingers first and then just sit the iron on top of the seam. And there we are, that one can go there. So I tend to work in twos. I'm going to join this row to that one and that to that. So I tend to do bottom onto top. And all I'm going to do here is just check that that seam is sort of sitting on top of the bottom seam. So I'm going to put a pin that side. Oh, I can't grab the pin. And we will just put one the other side, but that pin should hold it quite well. So you can see there that seam should be sitting on top. Now these are a bit harder to nest than when we press the seams in opposite directions. So just take your time on this bit. And if they don't come out perfectly, don't worry. Perfection is not the name of the game. Unless it bothers you, then take it out and redo them. But you can just take sort of an inch or so across the seam. You don't have to unpick the whole seam. So that's my bottom bottom rows. So this is a quilt-as-you-go method, and people do make whole quilts like this, just sort of make your squares a bit bigger. Right, let's take those to the machine. And as I'm getting closer to that seam, I'm actually going to take that pin out, and I'm just going to hold it there and do what they call finger press, which is just put the weight of my fingers along that seam, just to make sure that I'm happy with where that is. Now that one, I'm going to keep going. It's a little bit clunky because it's quite thick there, so just go over it gently. Yep. So there it is, all put together. Now I would just take that to the iron and just give those seams one final press and press all of these seams open as well. But that's what it looks like. So a nice little quilt-as-you-go cushion front. Now we've got a couple of other cushion tutorials where we've done a lap zip back or an envelope back. So you can have a look at either of those if you want ideas to finish that off. But there's sort of a recreation of the just the 16 patch cushion, just using our scraps to give us those blocks of colours. So I hope that gives you some ideas of how to use the scrap bags. If you have a go at this project, do share any of your photos with us on any of our social media platforms. Thank you for your time today, and I hope you'll join me again here in the sewing studio.